Hello and welcome to the latest Liverpool Echo Blood Red podcast. I'm Matt Addison. Alongside me today are Paul Gorst and Sean Bradbury. No game for Liverpool this weekend, but we'll take a look back at the victory over Ajax and what that means, plus a couple of other bits too, including Jude Bellingham and how the Liverpool midfield area is shaping up. Let's go to Ajax first, though, Gorsty. A late winner that Liverpool undoubtedly deserved on the night. And as much as the result was important, I think the performance was important as well for Liverpool, and it was certainly a lot better than what it had been a week previously.
Yeah, I mean, Klopp called that Napoli game the worst of his 7 years, didn't he? So that's quite an indictment when you think of some of the beatings that Liverpool have had occasionally during his time at the club. Few and far between, you'd have to say, but there are one or two, aren't there? I'm thinking of Tottenham. Man City beat them 5-0 at one point, didn't he? I remember a particularly poor night in Belgrade, was it, in the Champions League? But for Klopp to say that the Napoli one was the worst of the lot kind of shows you how much he thought needed to be worked on, really. It sounded like it was quite a intense couple of days from Friday onwards in terms of the analysis meetings, and Joel Matip hinted as such, and so did Klopp in his Monday press conference, without ever kind of detailing exactly what was said in the meeting. But so there should be, to be honest. I mean, maybe it is time that a few kind of home truths were told, and, you know, with Liverpool were a bit more forthright in the analysis, because it hasn't been good enough across the entire season, has it? And it certainly reached an nadir in Naples. It was a really disastrous night for Liverpool. I mean, you can lose, you know, away at Napoli. Liverpool have done that before, but it was the manner in which they were beaten. They were absolutely battered. It could have been 6, 7 or 8. But there were some signs of improvement on Tuesday night. I thought it was a performance that kind of had glimpses of the old Liverpool. They didn't really put the keeper under too much pressure, to be fair. They deserved to win, but at a certain point it looked like the only way they were going to get the win was through a set piece or a corner, because they were just dominating Ajax every time with them, and so it proved to be with Matip getting the winner. So yeah, a step in the right direction, but I think I wrote it in the match verdict. It's probably unrealistic to expect Liverpool to go from that performance at Napoli last week and the general form of the season to just being back to the absolute best on Tuesday night. So it probably is, they've done about as well as could be expected. A good win, a much improved performance, and something that they can build on the other side of the international break, which I think, I have to say, has come at a perfect time for Liverpool, to be honest.
Yeah, it'll certainly allow them to get one or two players back from injury, which is always going to help, and allow them a bit of time to work on things as well. But I suppose the question now, Sean, is, was this a turning point? Was it a one-off? Can Liverpool kick on? And I suppose it kind of feels in some ways like the season should start here, but I suppose it's a different question whether it does start here.
Yeah, I don't think I'd go quite fully and be able to say it was a turning point. They're certainly having a little look around the corner, though, aren't they? I think, as Gorsty said, it was a lot of the elements that have made Liverpool tick when they've been at their best in recent seasons, and certainly last season, felt like they had begun to be slotted back into place. Particularly the front line were really good, not just in their pressing, volume of pressing by Diaz, but just the coordination of it was really good. Obviously, great to see them all link up for the goal in a nice little 1-2-3 way with Salah slotting that quite early on, but just lots of different elements. I mean, obviously we could talk about Thiago. We could do a whole podcast on him. I think he was quite transformative in terms of his influence on and off the ball. He was fantastic, but it goes beyond that for me as well. I think Tsimikas was really good, possibly his best game in a creative sense that I can remember for Liverpool. Obviously getting his assist, but he was just very dangerous and accurate with his delivery all night. And I think Matip, just the way not only he defends, and as Gorst alluded to, the threat he carries from set pieces alongside with Van Dijk in an attacking sense. But that thing that we saw a hell of a lot last season, where he'd step out effectively, you know, come out from the back in defence and change the picture a little bit and create extra angles for attack was really good. But yeah, to be honest, that by about 85, I'd almost made peace in the ground with it being a draw, and thinking, well, you know what, Liverpool have deserved to win here. And there's not even many games this season where you can come out of it saying that. Obviously, Bournemouth was a romp, and then, you know, there have been other positive results, but it really did feel like Liverpool were in control of this one, and did limit Ajax to obviously the opportunity for the goal and the header that just whistled wide. But other than that, as much as they were bold and quite adventurous, I didn't think they carried too much threat, and Liverpool kept them at arm's length. But yeah, to get the winner, and in the manner it was, with that amazing let off and after the team diving into the cop was the cherry on top, really. So yeah, I agree with Gorsty. It's not quite a turning point, but this is truly something to build on, and it's just great that ahead of the extended international break, obviously with the postponements this weekend as well, there is a win for Liverpool to hang their hats on. And I just think, the mood in Kirby will be that little bit better when those honest conversations that Paul referenced are still going on. And, there's a hell of a lot to work on in these coming weeks, but this hopefully could be a real platform, not just for the Champions League campaign, but for everything, for the whole season.
Yeah, there's 3 players in there that Sean mentions. I think Matip is certainly one that made a huge difference. Diogo Jota at the opposite end of the pitch, another one. But let's have that Thiago conversation. Sean said there, Gorsty, that we could have an entire podcast just dedicated to him. And I think that's fair. He's helped Liverpool become more dominant and controlling in this game. But I think he made Fabinho look a lot better as well. I think the compactness of the midfield completely changed. He is just one of those players that does transform things for Liverpool. He made such a huge difference on Tuesday.
Yeah, he's an unbelievable footballer, isn't he? But what's kind of impressed me about him is we know how good he is on the ball and kind of dictating the tempo and picking the passes and keeping Liverpool ticking over. We've seen that when he was at Barcelona 10 years ago. We've seen it at Bayern Munich, a few years ago. And what kind of impressed me is the energy and just willingness to get about the pitch and put a foot in, really, because that's something that Liverpool massively have lacked and have missed. And we spoke, haven't we, a couple of times on the pod now about the role Harvey Elliott has in this midfield, and for all the kind of ability he has in possession, he's not someone who's going to go about snapping into tackles, pressing midfielders into mistakes and, winning the ball back for Liverpool. So Fabinho's been a little bit overworked at times this season, particularly in the Merseyside derby when he had Carvalho and Elliott either side of him, a couple of teenagers who were whose first thought is to get on the ball and look to play it about. So just to have Thiago back in the team from an in possession stance is always going to be a massive benefit. But out of possession, I think he's been superb as well. So we could talk about him all day, but you can also just say that we know what he's going to bring. He's a world-class midfielder, and he has been for pretty much all of his career. So it's always just a big caveat with him, isn't it? As long as he stays fit. There was one in the first half, was it, when he I think it was Salah who played it across through midfield, and the Ajax were pressing him and he just ran onto it and stepped over it, and there was massive gasps around Anfield as Kostas Tsimikas got away down the left. Just a superb football to watch. Not in the Spain squad, which was no surprise because I think the last Spain appearance was in the Euros, well over a year ago now. So that'll be a good point from Liverpool's perspective. Get a good solid week of training in him from the end of next week, and hopefully we're ready to see him have a prolonged stint in the team. And as you say earlier on, Matt, just get 1 or 2 bodies back as well. So he's just an unbelievable player, isn't he? And hopefully he stays fit and we can all watch him and hear about him and praise him all season.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it, Sean? You've got to keep him fit, and as Gorsty says, the international break for him will sort of help in terms of that. But I suppose you don't want to be over-reliant on him in one sense, but at the same time, you don't want to take anything away from him because he's just ridiculously good.
I mean, our spec is in the lower Kenny Dalglish, as it is now known, and it's just great. I mean, obviously, anyway, you sit at Anfield to watch this Liverpool team, you're in a privileged position, but we basically get a half where Thiago's in that little pocket on the left, right in front of you, doing his thing, and then, when things flip around, you've got Trent, you've got Salah, you've got Elliott, and they're all right in front of you. But I was just mesmerised by him on Tuesday, to be honest, and I think Gorsty's put his finger on all the facets of what he brings and how it's almost you have to broaden out with every game that you do see him play, like how much he offers this Liverpool team. Obviously there's the football inside of it, and I genuinely think this is a bit of a mad shout, but it not in the sense of Steven Gerrard, because Steven Gerrard could be the complete midfielder in a very different way to someone like Thiago. If you're looking at a complete midfield performance in the Gerrard mould, he's at the heart of everything, isn't he? He's bristling with end product and just rhythm and energy, and he's a force of nature popping up all over the pitch. Obviously, you don't quite get that with Thiago, but I think that when he plays like that, it is quite a complete midfield performance. I can't see what more in a footballing sense you could ask from him. You know, he's a master of a very specific craft that involves switching to play effortlessly. I think he pinged pretty much every single long pass he attempted the other night came off. You know, he can relieve pressure. He's an outball himself. And just the way, as the second half wore on, obviously, I think there was a 10-15 minute period where Liverpool's heads dropped a little bit. It was like, are we going to be able to grind out this win? But you just see, like, you know, when Van Dijk or Matip bring it forward and give it to Thiago, he's got that almost like relentless patience where he just keeps doing his thing, and it really does help, like, de-energize and grind down the opposition. But then, like Gorsty was saying, his wider kind of like leadership and energizing, I thought that was really, really kind of marked the other night, because there was a point right in front of us where one Ajax player in a kind of overzealous moment bundled Tsimikas right into the advertising board, and like Thiago almost like pressed Tsimikas. He like ran towards him, eyes popping out, and his hands like thrust in front of him to calm him down, just to make sure he didn't react. And you know, that's real leadership. And later on, as the game was like reaching its final stages, there was a bit where he was obviously trying to G Diaz up a little bit, because Diaz had put such a shift in. He was like, I think Diaz like, you know, won a tackle or won a throw in or something. He was like chest bumping with him. And obviously he's got that thing of knowing what the button is to press for each different player to get that extra 5 or 10% out of them, which is real leadership. And, you know, there's already a lot of players in the Liverpool leadership group. There's captains all over the pitch, really, isn't it? Or, well, a few of them currently on the treatment table, but you know the point I'm trying to make. But here's a guy who just uses all his experience, you know, in his head as well as his feet, and yeah, just really can't praise him enough. He was excellent the other night, and hopefully in the weeks and months to come this season.
Yeah, before we move on from the midfield, we might as well have that chat around the kind of balance and that kind of thing. I know there's been a little bit of talk around Harvey Elliott and that kind of thing that you referenced a little bit earlier on, Gorsty, but I just think Thiago will make a huge difference in that. I think we saw the midfield balance look a lot better, and it wasn't because Harvey Elliott wasn't there. He obviously was still there and got into those good pockets of space, but Thiago makes a huge difference in that sense as well.
Yeah, he just makes a massive difference in every sense, doesn't he? I mean, he's approaching his 2-year anniversary now, isn't he, Thiago? I think it's on Sunday since he signed for Bayern Munich. It's just a shame that Liverpool couldn't have got him, you know, maybe 3 years younger than he is, because he's just an incredible talent, isn't he? I think there's an argument to be made for him being the most high-profile signing that Liverpool have likely ever made, because it's tended to be the players who become superstars at Liverpool have kind of made the name at Liverpool. He came having only ever played for Barcelona and Bayern Munich, a 2-time Champions League winner who pretty much won the lot across his career. So when he signed 2 years ago, it was a massive deal for Liverpool, and it hasn't quite gone according to plan as of the first season. There was plenty of caveats for why that was. Last season was a bit more like it in terms of the season that Liverpool had, and he was unbelievable from probably February onwards. It's just always the issue, isn't it? You know, can he stay fit? 50 minutes into the new season, he pulls up with a hamstring injury, and then he misses a month. But when he's fit and he's on this kind of form, you can see what all the fuss is about. So let's just hope there is now a real prolonged run of form, and I'm sure Liverpool will improve immeasurably if he is in that midfield every week.
You mentioned before as well, Sean, in terms of the Elliott thing and the balance and that sort of stuff. I mean, what's your sort of take on that? Is that the answer for Liverpool if the midfield maybe doesn't quite look perfectly balanced with Elliott in there? Maybe is Thiago the balancer, the one that kind of sorts that out, do you think?
Quite possibly. I think this situation over the next few weeks in terms of what to do with Elliott is one of the biggest stick or twist decisions Klopp's had for a while, really, because obviously, you know, they trust this player. He's a supremely talented youngster. This is a plan that's been coming for a while, hasn't it? This whole kind of purposeful lopsidedness, if you like, in terms of pushing the right-sided of the three midfielders a bit further forward, doing different things with Trent, popping Salah out wide. And I think lots of elements of it are working quite well. You know, they are a dangerous attacking trio, and probably been a little bit unlucky not to have seen a little bit more end product from that in terms of, you know, the positions they've been getting in, the shots they've been getting away this season. But obviously on the flip side of it, it has left Liverpool a bit exposed, and open to transitions and effective counter-attacking down that channel. And we've seen a lot of that, haven't we? Think back to the goal Palace scored, obviously the goal that came the other night, Napoli. You can point to a lot of games where that's been the problem area. But I do agree with what you're saying, Matt. I think Ian Doyle wrote a piece the other day and was just wondering, what is the next thing you do with Harvey Elliott, and they posed a few different options and solutions. And as we've said already, there's a few weeks now to really go and work on things. But I do wonder if the answer is as simple as keep playing him as long as it's alongside Fabinho and Thiago, because I do think that's really the ideal conditions, isn't it, to come in and learn that role and really get to grips with it. And Liverpool aren't really a team who can afford to have a player who's learning on the job. Certainly not in midfield, where, as we've always said, there is so much onus on all those players to almost deliver 110, 120% of what any other midfielder would have to do if they were playing in a 4 or playing for a team with less intensity and focus on pressing. But yeah, I do think the other night, though, as well, there was a little bit more measured approach in terms of what Elliott was doing. I mean, he was doing a hell of a lot of running. I don't think any player covered more distance than him in the first half. But I got the impression, and I might be wrong, I'd like to see a bit more analysis on this in a deeper sense, but I don't think he was quite committing to all-out attack and advanced positions as much as he had been in some recent games. It felt like perhaps the reinvention that Klopp's talked about and the decisions that need to be made about midfield structure had almost perhaps been factored into that a little bit. And there were a few times when Liverpool were resetting from when Ajax got the ball or the keeper had it, where it really did look like it was quite a clear and distinct 4-3-3, and Elliott was perhaps on a leash a little bit and doing a little bit more of what you'd have expected Jordan Henderson to be doing at his pomp in that role. And I think personally that's the key. That's what I'd like to see a little bit more of, a slight compromise in how much you commit in Elliott to go forward. But I would like to see them persist with him in that position alongside Fabinho and Thiago. I'd say right now, as it stands, that's first choice midfield 3 is a bit of a vague concept with Liverpool, isn't it? Given how much they'll have to rotate and how many midfielders there are. But if everyone's ready for the next home game, that's what I'd like to see. I think Elliott can play through this and has shown enough so far this season, with more encouraging glimpses the other night, that should be the kind of short-term plan, because clearly it is the long-term plan, isn't it? And that's what Liverpool have been working towards for at least the season now, and they would be further down this road were it not for the unfortunate injury he had. So yeah, it'd be very interesting to see how that unfolds.
Yeah, I think that the sort of Henderson comparison is a really good one, actually. I think it kind of probably helped Trent in terms of the positioning of where he needed to be. It probably helped Mohamed Salah as well, because he didn't have him in that same sort of area of sort of being in the same spaces and that kind of thing. It seemed to work quite nicely. And I suppose that kind of ties in as well with Diogo Jota, Gorsty through the middle. I think almost as much as Thiago, really, I think he made a huge difference for Liverpool in terms of how that looked. We know all of the good things that he can do, but he kind of linked everything together. He was pressing, he created the first goal. It was just a reminder, really, I think, after a little bit of time where he hasn't scored a goal, but, as maybe not looked quite so good, possibly this was a reminder to a few people of just what Diogo Jota can bring to the table.
Yeah, I think Klopp kind of went back to basics with it, didn't he? Matip back in, down the centre of defence, Thiago in midfield, and then Jota up front. And the thing with Jota is, it was his first start since the Wolves game in May. Obviously, he had that hamstring injury in July and in pre-season in Thailand, so he hasn't played a whole lot. But one thing you're always going to get from him, when he might not necessarily be at 100%, he's going to roll up his sleeves and work and have a bit of a go, get stuck in, and just really take the fight to whoever he's playing against. And that's what he did. Obviously, he got his assist, didn't he, with the first goal, laid in Salah. And I just thought he was just a constant thorn in Ajax's side all night. And, okay, it'll take some time before he's back at the level he was at throughout most of last season, when he scored 21, I think, in all competitions. But while you're waiting to kind of play yourself back to that level and get yourself fit again, he was great in terms of him just really putting in a shift, which is at a time when you're struggling, the confidence isn't too high, and you've got 1 or 2 injuries, and the season quite hasn't gone how it was meant to go. You need someone like that, and you need those types of performances. So I was making the point for Darwin Núñez. I just think perhaps he needs a little bit of a run of games just to finally get his feet under the table and really show what he can do. But Klopp obviously thought wiser of it and put in Jota, and ultimately it was the right decision, wasn't it? But I just think while Jota and the team are waiting to kind of get back to those levels that we know that they can reach, he's always going to be someone who's going to put a proper shift in, and you can't really have a go at him for that because he works so hard.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? You mentioned the Darwin Núñez thing there. I think a lot of people probably would have gone for him over Jota in that one. But I suppose it's a reminder in a sense as well, Sean, of sort of the job that Diogo Jota's had to do. He's had to break into that Liverpool front three for the first time. He managed to do that. But now there's Luis Diaz there. There's obviously Núñez has come in. There's a new challenge for him to come in again, but it seems like he's going to thrive on that. And as Gorst said, he just worked so hard, if nothing else. We know all the other bits that he's got, but that was certainly something that we haven't necessarily seen from anyone in that number 9 position so far this season.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think it was, I was looking at the numbers on this after the game, and I think there was something like 160 pressing actions from Liverpool throughout the game, which was like one of their highest totals this season. And vast majority of them were in the final third and in attacking areas. And I think a lot of it stems from everything we talked about earlier on, which was all the elements that came together again in terms of players returning that made this more of a trademark Liverpool performance. Matip played this part, Thiago played this part in being able to squeeze further up the pitch. And that helped Jota in the forward line. But that was the most coherent and cohesive pressing performance from the front three I think we've seen this season, no doubt. And Jota played a big part in it. So did Salah. I thought he was excellent as well, tracking back, very markedly on a couple of occasions. There was that one where he came pretty much the whole length of the pitch to get back into the penalty area and help snuff out a dangerous break. But Diaz as well, I think he led the way. We had a piece from Andrew Beasley over the last couple of days, and I think Diaz pressed 33 times and loads of them on their keeper, and obviously all popping in from that left-hand side, and he was absolutely relentless. And I think when you put Jota in the mix, I think it was just, it really does bring a different angle to Liverpool's attack. And he's such a clever player as well, isn't he? He so often makes the right decision on the ball, and the fact he can pop both ways and is really good with both feet. I think you're right. Not that he's necessarily been like a forgotten man or a forgotten option, but the debate so far is centered around, well, is it going to be Firmino? Is it going to be Núñez? And obviously that's because partly Jota's been returning from injury, but I think Klopp would be hard pressed to change that front three, certainly over the next couple of games. I mean, October is crazy, isn't it? I think there's 9 games, isn't there? It's like one of the Decembers we've seen in recent months where the games just keep on coming. So in a way, I think rotation will answer our questions here. Núñez will have to play, Firmino will have to play, but right now, I think Jota has to keep his place.
Yeah, I'd like to see a bit of Núñez and Jota on the pitch at the same time as well. I think we've only seen that in Napoli so far, haven't we? So it'll be interesting to see kind of what happens there as well. But just before we finish, we'll move on to a couple of other bits around the midfield. I know there was some stories in Brazil, Gorsty, around Arthur and possibly Liverpool making an early decision on him, but I think it's safe to say that's probably not the case. I mean, there's going to be, a few opportunities, I would imagine, for him over the next few weeks. But again, similar to Darwin Núñez, anyone who's making a verdict on someone at this point in the season, going far too early.
Yeah, I couldn't believe that when I read it yesterday. This idea that Liverpool have given up hope 2 weeks in, just a little over 2 weeks in since Arthur signed. Even for, sport and media that makes snap judgments probably far too quickly, I thought that was particularly extreme. Speaking to someone about it today, and basically the message is that it's complete nonsense. In all honesty, they're going to use the international break to give him a proper go, get him in the gym, get him in, individually tailored training programs and with the team as well when they return. So it's, as you were, no real shock. He hasn't played. We played the come on against Napoli, didn't he, for 15, 20 minutes or whatever it was. But other than that, I think his most recent appearance was May. Didn't really have a pre-season to speak of. So Liverpool looked at it that he's come in kind of behind schedule, and it's basically up to them to get him up and running and up to speed as quickly as possible. And of course, there are kind of debates to be had about that and about the decision to do that in terms of the club's strategy and transfer policy. But for the player himself, there's not too much he can do in terms of if he's behind schedule, and what can he do other than showing up to training, putting in a shift, and showing Klopp that he's no busted flush. He's only 26, so it's not like Liverpool have signed someone who's in his mid-30s and is on his way to the knackers yard. So hopefully he can just have a really good couple of weeks in training, and on the other side of that, when Liverpool are playing, one every 3 days, he will get an opportunity here and there, and we can finally see what he's all about and why he's been courted by the likes of Barcelona and Juventus early in his career. But certainly, 2 weeks into his Liverpool tenure, there are no judgments being made about him just yet.
Yeah, I think the next 2 weeks could be important for him as much as anybody else, really. It'd be interesting to see how much of him we do see in the next month. The other sort of midfieldy type thing I wanted to touch on, Sean, was Jude Bellingham. Obviously, I'm sure a lot of Liverpool fans would have been tuning in as he played and scored actually against Manchester City earlier in the week. I know Josh Williams wrote a piece for us on Liverpool.com around the kind of performance that he put in there, and it was almost like a Gini Wijnaldum type thing of working really hard, winning the ball back and all the rest of it. I thought that was an interesting thing, and as I say, I'm sure a lot of Liverpool fans would have tuned in just to have a little look at what he did against City.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've only seen bits and pieces of him this season, but from reading about him and looking at the numbers and watching highlights of games, no doubt that he's been Dortmund's outstanding performer so far this term. And I think every time I see him, he seems to pop up in a different position, and not just like, through the game, but like where he starts, it might be on the left or the right of a midfield three. It might be as part of a double pivot if Dortmund are going 4-2-3-1. That versatility, I think, is something that clearly it would appeal to Klopp and decision makers at Anfield, and clearly will be catching the eye of every top club across Europe. But yeah, I was quite struck by what Guardiola was saying after the game, because I'm sure City would be another club who'd be having a little look at him. But he said something like, he was following De Bruyne and Gundogan around in pockets and winning the duels and nicking the balls off them, and then quickly getting forward and getting into the type of positions he was in to score the goal. So, he's a very well balanced player, and he can play across the midfield. And I think that just absolutely screams Liverpool, doesn't it? And not just screams suitability for Liverpool, but screams what Liverpool need. Could have done with this summer, but will certainly need next summer. And the thing that strikes me about him that I suppose is kind of developing all the time is his physicality and his robustness. Like, he's 6'1", which I didn't realise. So he's not that far off Fabinho in terms of height. And I think in the Premier League, at least, and in Liverpool's midfield, if you're part of a three, that would really come in handy. That kind of extra element of competitiveness. And yeah, he's just ready. I think he's ready for the next level. He's already playing at pretty much the highest level you can play at. And last season, I think he played more minutes in the Bundesliga than any other player for Dortmund. So, although he's a teenager, he's one with vast experience. No kind of like direct comparison being made, but were he to come to Liverpool or any team next season, he'd be coming in at a level above where the likes of Elliott and Carvalho are right now, aren't they? That's just a fact. But I suppose that the worry with him is that as his profile continues to rise, and he's got he will have lots of opportunities this season to impress, won't he, in multiple competitions, and of course in the World Cup. I just think all eyes will be on him, won't they? And various European journalists on Sky and elsewhere have been speaking about him over the last few days since that outstanding performance against City. And they've all mentioned Liverpool, to be fair, which is exciting and encouraging, but they've all mentioned City, United, Chelsea, Madrid, and all these teams who may well be in the conversation for him next year. So my guess would be, Liverpool are at the top table, aren't they? So there's no reason why they shouldn't be pushing for a signing like him, and clearly he would fill a significant squad gap that will be more pronounced next season, when perhaps a couple more midfielders will have left. But I think if he's to come to Liverpool, he will have to want to come to Liverpool almost above all those other teams, because the last thing Liverpool want and the last thing they can afford to get involved in really would be any kind of bidding war with those other European giants. So, I think if Bellingham's got his heart set on Liverpool, I'd like to think that could be a transfer that has some semblance of reality. But long way to go and a huge season in the offing for him to try and decide where he does end up.
Yeah, certainly a few more performances like that, and I'm sure the queue of suitors Gorsty would continue to increase. But I suppose the key point really, as Sean says, is if Liverpool are interested, there's no reason not to pick Liverpool. They are at that level now where it would be a realistic conversation to be having.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of wages, you'd argue that Liverpool probably can't offer quite what Manchester City are able to. But you know, if it's just down to like a kind of sporting proposal, if you like, Liverpool have got as good a chance as any of landing Bellingham. You know, if they are to be in the mix in just a little under a year's time, say next summer, probably early spring, you'd imagine the kind of overtures are starting to be made, aren't they? So you'd imagine they will be pulling up a chair for those discussions, and then it's just about whether they can convince the player to come. Obviously, be able to have his pick if Dortmund are committed to selling him. But I mean, at Liverpool, he'll be playing every week, won't he? Pretty much. He could be playing every week for the best part of 10 years, to be fair. So, yeah, I mean, he will have plenty of options, I'm sure. But there's no reason to think why Liverpool aren't able to land him, just because of everything that's gone on the last few years and the kind of standing of where they are now in world football, as Sean says. So, yeah, it's certainly one to keep an eye on, maybe in the new year when attention starts to turn towards the January window and then beyond. But for now, he's obviously a Dortmund player and is playing very well for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly one to watch out for over the next few months. But I think that'll do us for today's podcast. No game, of course, over the weekend. Plenty of content, though, in the usual places for you to have a look at during the next couple of days. The Blood Red podcast, of course, will be back on Monday. But for now, that's all we've got time for. Goodbye for now.